She poured coffee in a diner at
Look at line
midnight.
450 here.
He ran a billion-dollar
It seems to be
company
pulling
that
the
was
old vendor
bleeding
ID.
money by the
I'll
hour.
patch it quickly.
Neither of them
The
knew that a
inventory script isn't
conversation
updating
over
correctly.
cold eggs
Look at
and
line 450
desperation
here.
would rewrite both their
It seems to be
futures
pulling the old
and
vendor
prove
ID.
that sometimes
I'll
the
patch it
person who can
quickly.
save you is the one you'd never think to ask. Let me tell you about the night a billionaire's world came crashing down in a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. Eris Thorne didn't look like a man who owned anything anymore. He looked like a man who'd lost everything that mattered, and maybe he had. 3 weeks. That's how long Corsynergy had been dying. 3 weeks of system crashes that started small, like a cough you ignore, and grew into something that threatened to devour everything he'd built. Every morning, another failure. Every afternoon, another $1 million evaporating into the digital void. Every evening, another conference call where his elite team of engineers, people he'd personally recruited from Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, stared at screens full of code and admitted they had no idea what was wrong. The media was circling now. Tech blogs that once called him a visionary were writing obituaries with headlines like "The Fall of Corsynergy" and "When Innovation Dies." Investors were making polite phone calls that weren't polite at all. His CFO had stopped sleeping. His entire leadership team looked like they'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. And Eris was sitting in a vinyl booth in a Denver diner at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, staring at error codes that might as well have been written in a language from another planet. He'd driven here without thinking, leaving another useless emergency meeting where 20 brilliant people said the same thing they'd been saying for weeks. "We're working on it. We'll find it. Just give us more time." But time was the one thing they didn't have. By Friday, they'd start losing clients. By next month, the company would be gone. The diner was nearly empty. A truck driver at the counter. An old couple in the corner, holding hands like they'd been doing it for 50 years. And Eris, alone, with his laptop and his failures spread out before him like evidence at a crime scene. He didn't even notice her at first. She moved quietly, this woman in her late 20s with her hair pulled back and her eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. She wore the uniform, white shirt, black apron, name tag that said, Chloe, like it was armor. Like if she moved carefully enough, stayed invisible enough, the world might forget to hurt her for a while. She refilled his coffee without asking. Most waitresses would have made small talk, tried to brighten his mood, fished for a bigger tip. But Chloe just poured the coffee, set the pot down, and started to walk away. That's when she saw his screen. Eris watched her freeze mid-step. Her eyes locked onto the error logs scrolling across his laptop. And something happened to her face, a flicker of recognition, like seeing an old friend in a crowd of strangers. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was quiet but steady. "I don't mean to intrude, but that's a recursive authentication loop, isn't it?" Eris looked up at her like she'd just started speaking ancient Greek. "What?" "The error pattern." She gestured carefully toward his screen, not quite touching it, like she was afraid he'd snap at her for overstepping. "I've seen that cascade before. The way it's failing, authentication module calling itself, overflow building with each iteration. That's a memory leak in your auth sequence." The diner seemed to go very quiet. "How do you—" Eris couldn't finish the sentence. His mind was trying to process what was happening. A waitress. A waitress was diagnosing in 30 seconds what his entire team couldn't solve in 3 weeks. Chloe's cheeks flushed. "I shouldn't have said anything. I'm sorry. She was backing away now, looking like she regretted every word. "I'll get you a fresh pot of coffee." "Wait." Eris's voice came out sharper than he meant it to. "Please. Wait." She stopped. "How did you know that?" The woman, Chloe, looked at him with eyes that held something complicated. "Shame, maybe. Or grief. I used to. I worked in systems architecture. A long time ago. Where? Does it matter?" Her voice was soft, defeated. That was a different life. But Eris was already pulling out the chair across from him. His hands were shaking, from exhaustion, from desperation, from the first real hope he'd felt in weeks. "Please. Sit down. Tell me what you see. Chloe glanced toward the kitchen, toward the manager who might yell at her for sitting with a customer. Then she looked back at Eris, at his laptop, at those error codes that clearly meant something to her that they didn't mean to anyone else. She sat. "It's in your authentication module," she said quietly, leaning forward. "You're probably using a deprecated function. Something old, something your team inherited from an earlier build and never replaced because it worked. But it's not actually releasing memory after each call. Every time someone logs in, every time a system authenticates, it's holding on to just a tiny bit of memory. Doesn't matter at low traffic. But at scale. It compounds," Eris breathed. "The leak grows until your entire system chokes on its own authentication requests." Chloe's eyes were bright now, alive in a way they hadn't been when she was pouring coffee. "You're probably seeing crashes during peak hours, right? When the most users are active." Eris just stared at her. "That was exactly when the crashes happened. Do you have a napkin?" Chloe asked. He pushed one across the table, and she pulled a pen from her apron. And then, right there in a diner at midnight, this waitress started sketching out code. Her handwriting was precise, elegant. The logic was flawless. She drew arrows showing the flow, circled the problem area, sketched out a solution that was so simple, so obvious once you saw it, that Eris felt like an idiot for missing it. "You replace this function with this one," she explained, her voice growing more confident with every word. "Explicit memory release after every authentication. Add a garbage collection protocol here. And, this is important, you need a failsafe that dumps memory if authentication exceeds a certain threshold. Like a pressure release valve." She slid the napkin across the table. Eris looked at it. Then he looked at her. "Who are you?" Chloe's confidence evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. She stood up, suddenly remembering where she was, who she was supposed to be. "I'm nobody. Just a waitress who talks too much. Your coffee's getting cold." But Eris was already typing, his fingers flying across his keyboard, implementing her solution in real time on his test environment. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2. The error logs stopped scrolling. The system stabilized. The crashes stopped. "Oh my God," Eris whispered. He looked up at Chloe with something like awe in his eyes. "Oh my God, it's working. It's actually working." Chloe stood frozen by the table, watching this billionaire stare at his screen like it was performing miracles. "Who are you?" Eris asked again, and this time it wasn't a casual question. This time it was the most important question he'd ever asked. And Chloe, this invisible woman in a waitress uniform, looked at him with eyes that held an entire buried life, and said the words that would change everything. "My name is Chloe Martinez. I have a master's degree from MIT in distributed systems. And until 18 months ago, I was a senior systems architect. Then my company downsized, and my father got sick, and..." Her voice cracked. "And now I pour coffee. Because that's what you do when no one will hire you and your family needs to eat." The diner was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Eris Thorne looked at this woman, this brilliant, invisible woman who just saved his company with a napkin and a pen, and he made a decision that would echo far beyond either of their lives. "Chloe Martinez," he said, his voice steady and sure for the first time in weeks. "How would you like your old life back?" The napkin sat on Eris Thorne's desk like a sacred artifact. "It shouldn't have worked." A solution scrawled in ballpoint pen on a paper napkin that still had a coffee ring staining the corner, that wasn't supposed to save a billion-dollar company. But it did. Within 6 hours of implementing Chloe's fix, Corsynergy's system stabilized completely. The crashes stopped. The error logs went quiet. Engineers who hadn't slept in days were staring at their monitors like they were witnessing a resurrection. And Eris was sitting in his office at 3 in the morning, holding that napkin, thinking about the woman who'd drawn it. Chloe Martinez. MIT graduate. Former systems architect. Current waitress. How many brilliant minds were out there right now, invisible, pouring coffee or stocking shelves or doing 1,000 other jobs that had nothing to do with what they were capable of? How many Chloes were in the world, their genius buried under bad timing and impossible choices, and a society that decided you were only as valuable as your current job title. The thought made him angry. And anger, Eris had learned, was useful when you channeled it into action. He called her the next morning. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. She'd probably worked the overnight shift after solving his company's unsolvable problem. "Chloe, it's Eris Thorne. I'd like to offer you a position." Silence on the other end. Then, "Mr. Thorne, that's very kind, but—" "Lead systems architect. Full benefits. Salary of $350,000 to start, with performance bonuses. And I'm covering your father's health care, all of it, separate from the standard benefits package." He heard her breath catch. "Mr. Thorne, I can't. You don't understand. I've been out of the industry for 18 months. My skills are probably outdated. I'd need time to catch up, to relearn." "Chloe." Eris's voice was gentle but firm. "You solved in 5 minutes what 20 of the best engineers in the country couldn't solve in 3 weeks. With a napkin. I think your skills are just fine. But what if I fail?" Her voice was so small. "What if last night was just luck? What if I get there and everyone realizes I don't belong and then you'll have failed at a company that was about to collapse before you saved it?" Eris smiled even though she couldn't see him. "Chloe, the worst-case scenario is you're exactly as good as the team I already have. And the best-case scenario? You're what I think you are. What you proved you are. Someone extraordinary." Another long silence. And then, quietly, "When do I start?" The first day was hell. Not because of the work. Chloe attacked problems like she'd been doing it her whole life, because she had. But because walking into Corsynergy's gleaming headquarters, past the security desk with her new ID badge, riding the elevator to the 9th floor with people in expensive clothes talking about projects and deadlines, sitting in a Herman Miller chair in front of 3 monitors in an office with her name on the door, her name, it all felt like a costume she was wearing. Like any moment, someone would tap her shoulder and say, "Sorry, there's been a mistake. You're not supposed to be here." Imposter syndrome, her therapist would later call it. That voice in your head that says everyone else earned their place but you just got lucky. That whisper that says you're a fraud, and it's only a matter of time before everyone figures it out. But here's the thing about Chloe Martinez. She might have doubted herself, but the code didn't lie. Within a week, she'd identified 3 more critical vulnerabilities in Corsynergy's infrastructure. Problems the team knew existed but couldn't isolate. Within 2 weeks, she'd restructured the authentication protocol so elegantly that senior engineers were studying her work like it was poetry. And within a month, she was leading design meetings where people twice her age were taking notes on her ideas. The breakthrough came in week 7. Corsynergy's biggest client, a financial services company managing billions in transactions, was threatening to leave. Their system needed to handle massive traffic spikes during market opens and closes, and Corsynergy's infrastructure kept buckling under the load. The client had given them 30 days. 21 of those days were already gone. Eris called an emergency meeting. 12 people around a conference table, all of them looking grim. "Ideas?" he asked. Silence. Then Marcus, the senior architect who'd been with the company since the beginning, sighed. "We'd need to completely redesign the load distribution system. Maybe partition the traffic across redundant servers, implement predictive scaling. But that's months of work, and we have 9 days." "We don't need months." Everyone turned to look at Chloe. She was standing at the whiteboard, marker in hand, her eyes bright with that same fire Eris had seen in the diner. "We need an adaptive protocol." "A what?" Marcus asked. And Chloe started drawing. Her marker flew across the board. Diagrams, code snippets, flowcharts that looked like art. "Current systems are reactive," she explained. "Traffic spikes, system responds, usually too late. But what if we built something that learns? An adaptive protocol that studies traffic patterns, predicts spikes before they happen, and preemptively allocates resources." That's theoretical," another engineer said. "Machine learning integration with infrastructure management, real-time predictive allocation, That's bleeding-edge stuff. Nobody's done that at scale. Chloe turned to face the room. Nobody's done it yet, she said quietly. Doesn't mean we can't. The room erupted into discussion. Questions flying, objections raised, possibilities explored. And Eris just sat back and watched Chloe hold her ground, answer every challenge, refine her idea until it went from theoretical to possible to inevitable. How long? He asked when the room finally quieted. Chloe looked at him. Give me 6 days and 4 engineers. If it doesn't work, you can fire me. Deal, Eris said. But nobody's firing you. They didn't sleep for 6 days. Chloe's team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and pizza and the kind of desperate energy that comes when you're trying to do something impossible. She was everywhere at once, coding, testing, debugging, encouraging her team when they hit walls, problem-solving when things broke, which they did, constantly. On day 4, Marcus found her in the server room at 2 a.m, surrounded by code on 3 laptops, tears of frustration streaming down her face because a critical module kept failing and she couldn't figure out why. Hey, he said gently, sitting down next to her. You know, when you first got here, I thought Eris had lost his mind. Hiring a waitress to be lead architect? I was ready to quit. Chloe looked at him, her mascara smudged, her eyes exhausted. You probably should have. You know what changed my mind? Marcus continued. Watching you work. You don't code like someone who's been away from it. You code like someone who never left. Like this is the language you think in. He pointed at her screen. And that error. We did it, she corrected, her voice shaking. No, Eris said firmly. You led. You created. This was your vision, Chloe. Own it. 3 months after that night in the diner, Chloe Martinez's adaptive protocol was running critical infrastructure for 12 major clients. Her father's medical bills were paid in full, and for the first time in 2 years, he was getting the treatment he needed. The patent for her protocol, filed in her name, would be worth millions, and Eris made sure she owned a significant portion of it. But the thing that mattered most to Chloe happened on a Tuesday afternoon when Eris called her into his office. I want to start something, he said. A scholarship fund. For people with non-linear career paths, people who got knocked down, who had to take jobs that didn't match their skills, who have gaps in their resumes that don't tell the whole story. I want to give them what I gave you. A chance. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Eris. We're calling it the Martinez Initiative, he continued. Because you proved something I always believed but could never demonstrate. That talent doesn't disappear just because circumstances change. That genius doesn't expire just because someone had to pivot to survive. That the person who can change your life might be the one everyone else is too blind to see. I don't know what to say, Chloe whispered. Say yes. Say you'll help me find more people like you. Say you'll help me prove that everyone deserves a second chance to be who they were always meant to be. Chloe looked at this man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself, who'd turned a conversation in a diner into a second life. Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. A year later, the Martinez Initiative had funded 63 people. A former teacher who became a data scientist. A laid-off journalist who revolutionized Corsynergy's communications strategy. A restaurant manager with a philosophy degree who transformed their ethics and compliance division. And Chloe. Chloe was now Chief Technology Officer, leading a team of 200 engineers, speaking at conferences about adaptive systems and infrastructure innovation. But once a month, she volunteered at that same Denver diner, having coffee with people whose name tags didn't match their potential, looking for the next person everyone else had stopped seeing. Because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible. She remembered what it cost to be forgotten. And she remembered that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. From a chance encounter, a moment of courage, and someone willing to look past the uniform to see the genius underneath. The napkin still sits on her desk now, framed under glass. A reminder that your past doesn't define your future. That setbacks aren't endings. That the world is full of brilliant people waiting for someone to give them a chance. And that sometimes, the person who saves you is the one you'd never think to ask. The one pouring coffee at midnight, carrying dreams no one bothered to see. Until someone finally did. We are all so much more than the jobs we do, the titles we hold, the circumstances that contain us. And somewhere out there right now, there's someone extraordinary doing something ordinary, waiting for the world to remember that talent doesn't disappear. It just goes quiet until someone's listening.